It was one of those mornings. You know, the kind where everything's just perfect. I walked out onto my back patio, coffee in hand, and just stood there for a second, letting it all sink in. The sun was doing its thing, hitting my solar panels just right, making the whole system hum with a quiet satisfaction. It was the sound of a life well planned, a life that wasn't going to be at the mercy of utility companies or anyone else. I had spent months designing that system. It wasn't just a few panels slapped on the roof. No, this was a work of art. A 15-kilowatt array, black on black, sleek and shiny, sitting on top of my house like a crown. I designed that line for the community, for the people. If the grid ever went down, my system could power the community center, turning it into a shelter. People wouldn't have to suffer through a power outage. I never asked for thanks, never looked for praise. It was just something I did. For the good of the people. I was all about energy independence, and my little slice of Texas was humming along perfectly. Until she showed up. Carol Miller. The name still makes me grit my teeth. I saw her standing across the street, staring at my house, clipboard in hand, her phone raised like she was trying to take a picture of something rare, something wrong in her eyes. She stood there for a good minute, studying my roof like she was looking for a way to ruin my day. She was the president of the HOA, the Maple Creek Estates HOA, and in her mind, my solar panels didn't belong. You have to understand, Carol wasn't just a stickler for rules. She was a tyrant in a yoga outfit. She had that beige is best mentality, like some kind of suburban warrior. Anything that didn't match the unspoken uniform of the neighborhood was a threat, and I was about to become her target. She snapped a couple of pictures, made some notes, and then marched off. I didn't wave. I wasn't going to acknowledge that she'd invaded my space. I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction. It's funny, at the time, I didn't realize how much trouble she was about to stir up in my life. 2 days later, the first blow came. A letter. It was taped to my front door with more packing tape than anyone should ever use, like she was trying to make sure I couldn't pretend I didn't see it. I ripped it off, feeling that little chip of paint come off with it, like a tiny victory for her in some weird HOA battle she'd been waging in her head. The letter was as formal as a funeral invitation. Maple Creek Estates Homeowners Association. Preserving harmony. Protecting investments. It started with, "Dear Mr. Henderson," and I could already tell this was going to be a nightmare. It didn't take long to get to the point. My solar panels violated HOA rules. They disrupted the neighborhood's aesthetic. They created glare, apparently, and they didn't fit the approved palette of materials. I remember reading the letter out loud to myself, my voice getting lower and lower, every word adding weight to the growing frustration. I had gotten approval from the previous board. I had all the paperwork. I had the signed letter. But Carol had other plans. She had decided my house was too off-brand for her vision of Maple Creek Estates. And so she went on a crusade. That's when I realized this wasn't just about rules. It was about control. She didn't want just a perfectly manicured neighborhood. She wanted a perfectly controlled one. And if my solar panels were a threat to her control, then she would fight me on it. At first, I thought it was just a mistake. A rookie HOA move. I'd email her the approval letter, and it'd be over. She'd have to apologize, and life would return to normal. But oh, how naive I was. When I showed up at the HOA meeting that Wednesday night, I thought I'd be walking into a room full of reasonable people. But instead, I walked into the land of beige. Beige walls, beige carpet, beige chairs, and Carol sitting at the head of the table like she owned the place. She didn't even look at the approval letter I handed her. She just waved it off like it was nothing. "Mr. Henderson, that letter is irrelevant," she said, like she had the right to rewrite history. The other board members were just there to nod along. Jerry was like a dog on a leash, just agreeing with whatever Carol said. Mildred, the oldest one there, tried to speak up for me, but Carol shut her down with a wave of her hand. And when I tried to explain the technical side of it, though the panels were designed to minimize glare, Carol just laughed it off. "The decision of the previous board is not binding on this board," she said with a smirk. The vote was quick. Carol's way. The violation stood. My panels had to come down. But Carol didn't know what she was up against. I didn't need to win a simple HOA dispute. I needed to make sure everyone knew who the real villain was here. So, I got to work. I decided to build a fence. Not just any fancy 8-foot cedar privacy fence. I wanted to block my backyard from prying eyes. But the real kicker? I knew Carol would flip out. So, I did my homework. There was a loophole in the HOA bylaws that allowed for a fence taller than the usual 6 feet if it had lattice work and vines. I called Dave, a contractor I knew. He came over, saw what I was up to, and immediately got it. "You're doing this because of Carol, huh?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "I'm not building a fence just for privacy," I told him. "I'm building it for the principle of it." As we stood there, talking plans, I saw Carol across the street, standing in her yard, arms crossed, watching us. Of course, she marched right over, acting like I needed permission from her to do anything. She demanded to see my business license, my permit, everything. I smiled. "You'll get it all, Carol. Don't worry." It didn't take long before I had the fence up. And just as I expected, Carol wasn't done. She decided to take it further. She didn't show up with a letter or a fine this time. She showed up with a handyman, someone she hired to come sabotage my solar panels. When I came home that day, I didn't know what hit me. My system was offline. The fuse in the inverter was gone. The wires had been cut. And there was a lock, one of those heavy-duty padlocks slapped on the shut-off box. The look of it made my stomach churn. This wasn't a mistake. This was deliberate. I was furious. But there was no time to waste. The hurricane was coming. Hurricane Veronica was barreling down on Texas, and the community center, the one place I had secretly made a backup power source for, was going to need that power. I had to fix it. I had to fix it now. With the storm closing in, I grabbed my tools, and I called in favors. I managed to get the parts one needed, but it wasn't easy. The storm was already hitting. The police came by too. They got a call about a disturbance. Of course, Carol had called them. She couldn't let this go. The officers were cool, though. They saw through it. They knew what this was. And they told me to keep doing what I was doing. I managed to bypass the inverter, using a direct line from my batteries to the shelter's electrical panel. It was dangerous. It was risky, but it worked. The lights came on. The emergency lights, the oxygen machines, they all came back online. People in the shelter, people who had no other place to go, us safe again. And then Carol, who had tried to ruin everything, came walking into the shelter like she was some kind of victim. She saw me, and the smugness on her face just melted away when I called her out. I didn't have to yell. I didn't have to scream. All I had to do was point at her and say, "She sabotaged my system. She did this." The room went silent. Carol's face turned red. It was over. The community saw her for what she was. The fire chief took her statement. The police knew what was going on. And a lawyer from the city, one who had been in the shelter, filed a lawsuit against her and the HOA. Within a week, Carol was removed from office. But that wasn't the best part. The HOA had to pay for my system to be fixed. They upgraded my panels, they replaced my inverter, and they made sure my system was better than ever. A month later, I was sitting on my patio again, looking at my beautiful new panels, enjoying the sunshine. And I heard a rumor Carol had put her house on the market. She was leaving town. I couldn't help but smile. Some people just can't handle the sunshine. So, here's the thing, I didn't start this fight. I didn't want to be in the middle of it. But sometimes, when you're pushed far enough, you have to stand up and fight for what's right. And to Carol? Well, let's just say that the sunshine never looked so good. What do you think? Is it okay to fight back when people like Carol take things too far? Leave your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to share your own stories. Let's talk about what happens when people abuse power in their communities.